Music theory with OneNote. 12 color sets, which are kind of like 12 different crayon boxes, each having 7 notes, which have 7 colors, in essence, 7 crayons in each of the 12 different crayon boxes. You get it? You see the analogy? See what I did there? Anyways, get ready and some coffee, because although we're just playing with OneNote, it's a beautiful note. You're not required to, but if you have access to it and would like to follow along, we're currently in the OneNote file of Modal Node System, MNS Presentation 2111 OneNote, 12 color sets of 7 notes, list of presentations, which we plan on adding plenty more to shortly. Also noting, in this OneNote presentation, we'll spend all our time on music theory, but we have another similarly numbered and named presentation where we build these tables in Excel, practicing Excel music theory and table visualization all at the same time. Let's get a general overview of what we want to do. That being, we want to maximize the use of color to better understand music theory in general, and more specifically, better be able to navigate the fretboard. This example of the fretboard, which has, of course, the low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling on top, showing the 7-note collection around the C major, noting that each of the notes have a color assigned to it, not just randomly. We didn't just splash some random color on it. That's what losers do. If you're cool, what you do is you get really pedantic about it and you map the color wheel on top of the pitch wheel so that each of the notes can be named not only by letter, not only by number of note, but by color. I could just say that's the red one. That's the red note. That's the yellow note, and so on and so forth. So that's how cool people do it. You might not meet too many cool people out there because okay, that's not. Maybe I got that. I don't know. Anyway, so because most people don't know the color system, but if they did, then they would do it this way because it's the best. It's the best way. Okay, so learning a color for each of the notes is great for our association of the notes, but we also might want a color system that will be fixed not to the note, but to the mode. So remember, when we're navigating the fretboard, this whole shape will shift up. It would be nice if we had the same relative colors tied to what I'm calling the continents in our planet analogy, meaning tied to the Ionian or the Nashville number system, the Locrian, the Dorian. So for example, if I go from the colors, the 7-note color set around the C major to the 7-note color set around the D major, you can see here the colors are actually still the same for each of the notes. So this red is still this red, this yellow is still this yellow, even though we have a different set of notes that we are playing in this situation. That's great, but I might want a situation where I could say, hey, look, let me go back to the normal color set that we had before around the 7-note collection of the key of C, but this time it's not tied to the key of C, it's tied to the node, the Ionian node, the Phrygian node, and so on. This time, when I go up from the 7-note collection around the C major to the 7-note collection around the to the D major, the color set moves up. So now I have the same color set moving up, making it easier to see this shape. You can see this shape here, and this shape has now basically moved up with the same color features. Now, when you first look at all these colors, they look overwhelming. There's like too much going on. It's a little too busy. But once your eye gets used to it, you'll note the pattern here, not only by pattern on the guitar, but also by the color pattern that is happening. And by the way, you can also see the color pattern even when the notes change, because you can start to visualize where these colors actually fit on the circle of the color wheel. So even though the colors change, the relative relations between the colors, as you visualize where they land on the color wheel, will stay routine. But this is clearly the easiest way to see it. All the colors will remain the same. The pattern, not only in pattern on which notes you're playing, that pattern, but also the color pattern will move up. So that really could be a useful tool. And then we could add octaves as we go up an octave, noting that we're going to play with this color set in a future presentation. So right now, let's recap what we did before, and what we want to do is just list out all of the different colors. I know if you look at this table, if you look at that fretboard, and you look at something like this table, then it looks overwhelming. It looks like, again, it looks like a political propaganda flag or something. It's not. We're not doing any political propaganda thing here. This is a legit use of colors, okay? We're using the colors legitimately. We're not making any flags or anything. No, but it looks overwhelming when you see all of those colors like on the same place. But if we break it down to see what those colors mean, they really can be useful. Color is really useful to use. I'm an accountant, and let me just tell you, accounting often uses just black and white, even on their spreadsheets. Even when we went to Excel, they didn't use color, right? It was like color wasn't a thing. But honestly, if you start adding color, it really helps. And when you do that, you start to add color just like randomly, just to show what you're focused on. But then you can get more systematic with it and actually assign a meaning based on the color, which is becoming more and more accepted in normal spreadsheet worlds, right, these days. And the same thing I think is true for music. Most likely it's something that, again, it's almost the more, like, I guess, conservative, or the people that like the older stuff are saying, hey, look, I don't even like Excel. What are you doing in Excel, right? What's going on here? And then you're going to put color all over the thing and making, so that it's kind of, but it really helps, right? To associate the color with the notes. So what we want to do is basically break down how the color system is going to basically be working. And remember that the idea would be to visualize the patterns in as many ways as possible. If I can see this pattern by a color pattern, and I can actually visualize the pitch wheel with color by putting the color wheel on top of it, that adds a huge level of visualization, another kind of part of your brain looking at the same thing, that I think can be way helpful to basically increase your ability to understand this stuff. So let's do a quick recap of the colors. So what we did is we took the pitch wheel, and then we bent it into a circle, because pitch basically has a circle. We have the 12 notes of the pitch, which can tie into the degrees of a circle if we map them onto a circle. And we can do the same then for the color wheel, meaning we have 360 degrees, and we use the same 360-degree circle to map the colors onto the pitch wheel. What that means is that the colors are as maximally separated as they can be. Now, you still have some colors you're going to say, look, these two, I can't tell these two. Some people are better at telling colors apart than others, and I'm not great at it. I'm not like an artist, really, but I'm getting better at it. You can train yourself to get better at it. If you have normal eyes, or even less than normal eyes, I'm betting that you can actually get better, just like you can train your ear to get better at pitch. So if I see these two colors that are the same, I'm going to train my eyes to see the difference between those two. I'm not just going to sit here and go, I can't do that. That's like having someone saying that they can't tell the pitch difference between two things and they have normal ears. They're just too lazy to work on it, right? You can tell the difference, just work on it, right? Okay, so you can't tell the difference. Think of all the people that can't hear at all or can't see or anything, and you're sitting here whining because okay, anyway. So we have these maximally spaced, and we can also see that it's a circle, it's a number line, but we've wrapped it into a circle. So if you can visualize the spectrum of the color, and every time I hear that word, I start thinking I'm saying something political. It's not political. It's a spectrum. It's a line. If I can visualize that line that is happening, that we've now bent into a circle, then I can clearly line up the 12 notes, which will fit in that spectrum, right? So I want to know the order of the colors that are gonna appear, and then I can clearly associate the same order of the notes. So you can see how you can visualize that fairly clearly. So now we have the 1 through 12 notes. We have the letters for those notes. I'm also going to assign a dot and a square, which is basically like the even and odds to help us with pattern recognition as we map this onto the fretboard. And then we have the colors. So this is going to be the colors for the pitch that we're usually working in, which is like the middle part of the piano, but not from C, middle C to like C4 to B4. No, we're going from the middle, from A, the alphabet that we start measuring on. So it's going from A to G. Keep that in your mind, because a lot of people will kind of mix that up, and you could decide, oh, I should start it on C. It's kind of arbitrary to some degree, but I mean, if we start the musical alphabet in the middle section from A, it doesn't really make sense then to say that C is going to be my starting point. In other words, you could imagine making C the red one and starting from C, so that you start at the beginning of the spectrum, and if you're on the piano, you'd say that makes sense. But it doesn't really make sense, because we start the measuring at A. So we're going to make A is the red one. I think that would be the proper way to do it if we were to do everything kind of from scratch here without kind of the baggage we've picked up with the C being the right, if we kept everything even. So anyways, so we're going to associate and so this is in the middle octave, which is like around C4. I would like to call it just the middle octave, which would be 0 on the number line. And then we go 2 octaves up and 2 octaves down. We'll talk about going up octaves and down octaves later by adding a new factor, that being lightness. Lightness will be the factor that we're going to use when we get into octaves. But right now you can see these fretboards right here. I'm not getting into octaves. A lot of times on the guitar, we're not so concerned with octaves, right? I'm really just trying to find, if I'm looking for a C, I want to make a C. I'm not really caring so much if it's an inverted chord or whatnot, because I don't have as many options with 2 hands on the piano that has more octave spacing within it, right? On the guitar, we're kind of just grabbing what we can grab to some degree. So oftentimes we just want to see all the colors as though they're in the same octave range, just grabbing what we can. But later, of course, we might then want to focus on looking at the octaves, which we can add that more complexity, which adds a lot more complexity to map it onto a color system on the guitar. So we'll build up on that. But right now, we just have these colors that we need to be looking at, and we can think of them as the middle range in octaves, or we can apply it to all octaves, thinking of it as a circle that repeats. Even though it's going up in pitch, we're thinking of it as repeating. Now, the more I look at this, the more I want to actually memorize the color name as the note. So much so that I can name the note by color, meaning this would be a great flashcard kind of exercise. I want it, when I say red, what does red mean? I want to say A is red, and I want to say then if I see red, the note is A, right? I want it both ways on the flashcard, right? So then orange, A sharp, or B flat, which is note number 2, is going to be, we can call it orange red. I don't think we have any other orange, so I could just call it orange. Obviously, this makes sense from the spectrum of color, because we're going from, it goes from red to orange to green. So if you can visualize that spectrum, which is worth doing in and of itself, I'm not great at it myself. I've been fearing color my whole life because all the crazy gangsters out there have colors and stuff. So I've been walking around in just basically black and gray, maybe like brown, a lot of brown. So all the crazy gangsters are took all the colors, So I was like, okay, I don't deal with color, but now I'm bringing it back, man. I'm lose no fear. I'm gonna colors are for the normies can do color now. So then 3 is gonna be a B, and that's gonna be yellow. So then with the 4, note 4 is gonna be a C, and that's gonna be yellow green. Here's where it gets a little ugly, a little messy, because you got yellow green. And then 5, which is a C sharp or D flat, is going to be a normal green. And then 6, which is a D, is going to be spring green. Now, maybe I could come up with another color like mint green or something like that. But we will do another color set for the intervals. Because notice what will be cool later is, now that we think about this, and again, we're getting a little pedantic but wouldn't it be cool if I could say that we're going from A to C, and that's a distance of 1, 2, 3 notes, which would be a 3-note away minor third. And I name that just with color. So, right, I'm not going from A to C. I'm going from red to, what did we call that? Yellow, green, yellow. I'm going from red to green, yellow. And then I assign the color for the distance, right? Which maybe that's an orange distance. So then I'm going to have 12 color sets for the distance. So I can name everything just with color. So that gets a little wonky. Maybe you're not fully with me on board with that one. But still, this one, even if you don't go that next step, this one will still work. Anyway, so then we're going to go to 7. This is going to be a D sharp or an E flat. This is going to be cayenne, which reminds me of a pepper, which makes me think of red, but no. Cayenne is this blue color for some reason. I'm still not exactly sure why. But 8 is E, and that's going to be, we're going to call that sky blue. And then 9 is F. We're going to call that just normal blue. And then we've got 10, F sharp or G flat. We're going to call that violet. And then we've got 11, which is a G. We're going to call that magenta. It's not pink. It's magenta. Okay? And then we have 12, which is a G sharp or an A flat, and we're going to call that rose colored. Now, when we get into the octaves, I'm just going to change another factor, not the hue, not the color. Because it's different. The pitch, the lightness, not brightness, but lightness is what we're going to use as the factor to go up an octave and down an octave. We'll talk about that later. Okay, so then we mapped this out before, listing out all of the notes. Right now, I just want to think about the color, the sets of colors now, because this can get a little confusing. But if we break it down, remember, there's 12 notes in the musical alphabet. 12 notes in the musical alphabet. We can make a 7-note collection off of each of those 12 notes in the musical alphabet. So if I look at it like this way, let me move this down. So if I look at it this way, or we have them up here. Let's say there's 12 notes in the musical alphabet, and then we're going to make a 7-note collection off of those 12 notes. Now, we usually think about the 7-note collection. This is where it gets wonky, because you could say, well, wait a second. There are 7 different modes. So on those 12 notes, I could make 7 different collection of notes. But it's not exactly right? The easiest way to think about it is like, these are the 12 collections of notes, and then I'm going to apply the C major formula, whole, half, deriving 7 notes from each of these roots. Now, we could derive, again, from a Dorian and use the formula from the point of the Dorian, but we will end up with a collection of notes which will be the same as the related major. You see what I mean? So the nice way to present the collection of notes to people and what we're playing is, this is the collection of notes around the C major being the key for us to choose the collection of notes, and then we choose the tonic that we're playing within. So we're going to choose, we got 12 notes. We take the collection of notes using the C major formula, whole, half, and then within each of those 12 collections of 7 notes, we can choose which one we want to be the tonic, giving us 7 different modes or options, meaning we're going to paint our picture with our picture analogy with each of the different colors as my tonic. So again, if I look at this color set, you might look at this and be totally overwhelmed, but note, we're just talking about 12 sets of 7 notes, because when we look at all the scales, there are 12 times 7 scales when you take into consideration the modes, but all of the 7 scales all have the same notes in them. So if I'm only looking at one octave and one color set for the 12 colors in one octave, then you can only come up with, in Western music, or typically, generally in Western music, 12 different 7-note color sets, 12 different crayon boxes, and in each of those crayon boxes, you're going to have a lot of the repeat colors. because we're just going around in a circle. So let's just look at the collection of notes here. So if we have an A, if we apply the formula to the A, then of course all we're doing is taking this collection of notes and saying our formula is A whole, and then whole, half, whole, 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 half, and then it would repeat again or go around basically in a circle. So if we apply that formula for the major scale off of the A, we end up with an A, which is red, a B, which is yellow because we skipped the orange, a C sharp or D flat, which is going to be normal green, not green yellow or not spring green. And then we've got a D, which is spring green. And then we've got the E because we skipped cayenne, which is a sky blue. And then we've got the violet, which is an F sharp. And then we've got a G sharp, right? And that's going to be the rose. If I build the same, now you might say, well, what if I want to make an A minor? What if I want to make that an A minor? Well, you could use the same formula and build it off of the minor part of the formula, but you're going to end up with the collection of notes that's the same as the C major, because the C major has a related A minor to it. It's the same collection of notes. Therefore, it would be nicer, I know we don't do this, but it would be nicer, instead of saying we're going to be playing in A minor, it would be nicer to say, hey, look, we're going to be playing around the collection of notes off of the C major, so you can determine the collection of notes, and then we're going to be playing around the tonic of those collection of notes, the red note, or the sixth from a modal standpoint, or the A, which means we're making a minor. It's going to be a minor scales. That would be the easier way to tell people where everybody would be on the same page, right? I'm going to tell you the collection of notes based on the major scale formula, based on the 12 notes, and then tell you which of those 7 notes is going to be our root or tonic. Again, we don't do that in practice. We just kind of throw it at you. You're going to play A minor, and then you have to think, oh, I don't know how to do A minor. You could build it off the formula, or more likely, you're going to try to think what's the related major so that you can get the collection of notes that you're in, right? So anyway, so if I go then to the second one, the second note, which is an A sharp or B flat, now we have a collection of notes not starting on A, but on A sharp, which is the orange, because we're imagining our color spectrum goes from A to orange. And then we're going from orange, skipping the yellow, going to the yellow-green C, and then we're going to skip the green, going to the spring green, which is the D, and then we're going to go to the cayenne, and then we're going to skip the sky blue, going to the normal blue, and then we're going to skip the violet, going to magenta, and then we're going to go to skip the rose, going to the red. Okay, and then if I start on the B, now you can see the color palette going this way. We start the spectrum of color at A, at red, yellow, orange, and then yellow. And then if I go down this way, we're starting at yellow on our spectrum. So we're going from yellow, and then we're skipping the yellow-green and going just to normal green, which is a C sharp. And then we're skipping the spring green, going to cayenne. Then we're going to sky blue. And then we're going to skip normal blue and go to violet. And then we're going to skip magenta and go to rose. And then we're going to skip the red, going around the circle, wrapping around the circle, skipping the red and going to the orange. Now I'm thinking, why don't I have my list of colors over here? That would make it easier, right? Let's do that. So let's go to the C. This is going to be the normal one. The one we often work in the most, because we just traditionally have worked in the key of C. It doesn't have any sharps and flats in it. And therefore, this color set is the one we want to memorize most, because we're also going to assign that color set to the absolute kind of equivalent of the Nashville number system. So from a Nashville number system, we name the relative positions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, giving them an absolute number. We can now give them an absolute color. So these are the color of the continents that we can use as an absolute system. So that's going to be then we're starting on the C, that's going to be the yellow-green. So we're starting on the spectrum now at C. We skipped up, so we're visualizing the spectrum at C. And then we're going to skip the green, and we're going to go to the spring green. And then we're going to skip the cayenne and go to the sky blue. And then we're going to go to the normal blue. And then we're going to skip the violet and go to the red. And then we're going to, go to magenta. And we skip the rose and go to the red. And then we skip the orange and we go to the yellow as we go around the circle. All right, so that's the most important color set that we're going to use because, again, we're going to apply it like the national number system, like an absolute numbering system. We now have an absolute color system. Isn't that cool? Won't that be useful? Okay, yes, it will. The answer is yes. Let me answer that for you in case you were going to say no or something stupid. Okay, so now I'm going to say that we're going to start now on green. So if we start on green, then we're going to skip the spring green and go to cayenne. And then we're going to skip the sky blue and go to blue. And then we're going to go to violet. And then we're going to skip the magenta and go to rose. And then we're going to go from rose, skipping red, and go to orange. And then we're going to skip yellow and go to green as we go around the circle. If I go from D, then we're just going to start on the spectrum, which is a D, which is spring green. Spring green. So then we're going to say it's a whole step. So we skip cayenne and we go to sky blue. And then it's another whole step. So we skip the blue and we go to violet. Then it's a half step. So we go from violet to magenta. And then it's going to be a whole step. So we go from magenta, skipping rose to red. And then a whole step. So we're going to skip the orange and go to yellow. And then a whole step. So we're going to skip yellow, green, and go to green. Right? And then we've got the one that starts on the D sharp or E flat, which is going to be cayenne, starting right in the middle of the spectrum or the circle. If we bend it around, remember these two we've kind of fudged that to make it bend around. So we're on cayenne, whole step, skipping sky blue to blue, and then whole step, skipping the violet to magenta. And then we're going to go half step, going right to the rose. And then we're going whole step, skipping the red, going to orange. And then we're going whole step, skipping the yellow to the yellow-green. And then whole step, skipping the green, going to spring green. All right, if we start on the E, then we're starting on sky blue in the spectrum. So now we're going sky blue, whole step, skipping the blue, going to violet. And then we're going from violet, whole step, skipping the magenta, going to rose, going to rose, right? And then we're going to go from rose, half step, brings us around to red. Then whole step, red skips the orange to yellow. Then whole step, skipping the yellow, green to just plain green. And then whole step, skipping the spring green to cayenne. And then we would go half step back home to sky blue, which is on the top. That's where we started, of course. All right, if we're on the F, we start on the blue. If we apply the same formula, we're going to say, okay, we're going from blue, whole step, skipping the violet to magenta. From magenta, whole step, skipping the rose, going to red. From the red, half step, we're going to the orange. From orange, whole step, skipping the yellow to the yellow-green. From yellow-green, whole step, skipping the green to spring green. From spring green, skipping cayenne to sky blue. Now, again, you might say the same formula. What if you wanted to make an F, an F that's built off an F minor or something like that? You could do that, right? I can apply the formula from that point. However, I'm going to end up with a collection of notes that's going to be same as its relative major, right? So that's what we want to basically, keep in mind here. So, for example, if I said, well, what if I want to make something off of the F Dorian? Well, I could count out the formula from here, but if I went to the D sharp, then major, then I'm going to have the same collection of notes. So again, from my perspective, the nice way to tell people what you're playing in isn't just to say you're playing in F Dorian so much. Why? Because then you have to back into the collection of notes. It would be a lot easier to say, hey, look, we're playing around the collection of notes that is around the D sharp major, and then we're going to make the 2 the tonic, meaning we're playing to the related Dorian of the collection of notes that you typically derive with the major scale formula in Western music. That's kind of like just the default. You don't have to. You could derive it I could do the same table, mapping the same thing out from the Dorian. And then we can name all the collections of notes from the Dorian, and then you would have the related notes. We could derive it from any of them, but from Western music convention, we use the major key. So we might as well you might as well be nice to people and say, hey, look, I'm going to tell you the collection of notes based on the major key, and then tell you which note we're going to make the tonic, the root. Right? And I'm not going to change the number system, right? We're playing around the 2, the way the nice Nashville music things do it. It's not a hack. It's the better way to do it. Okay, let's say we're going around the G sharp. That starts at the violet part of the spectrum. Whole step is going to skip the magenta, going to the rose. Whole step is going to skip the red, going to the orange. Half step takes you to yellow. Whole step skips the yellow-green, going to green. Whole step skips the spring green, going to cayenne. Whole step skips the sky blue, going to blue. And if I took the half step back home, we end up at not purple. That's what normal people call it if you're not sophisticated. We call it violet. I don't know if there's a difference. Maybe there's a difference between purple and violet. Whatever. I'm learning colors here. Again, the gangsters, they kicked me out of the color. I thought I couldn't do color, but now I'm like, whatever, I'm going to learn color. I don't care. I don't care if you threaten me for learning my colors. This color's for normies. I'm going to say this is magenta. So now we start at magenta. Whole step, we skip the rose to red, and then we go whole step, skipping orange to yellow, and then we go whole step, skipping yellow-green to green, half step to spring green, and then we go whole step, skipping, I got messed up. I'm on the E, which is sky blue, and then whole step, going to violet. I messed up here. Let me do it one more. Let's try to do it right this way. This time I can do it this way. So let's say now we're all the way down on rose. We're starting at G sharp, which is rose. We're taking a whole step, going around the horn, skipping the red, going to orange. Whole step, skipping the yellow, going to yellow-green. Half step, taking it to the plain green. Whole step, going from plain green, skipping spring green, going to cayenne. Whole step, going from cayenne, skipping sky blue, going to plain blue. And then whole step, going from plain blue, skipping violet to magenta. Then we could take that half step back home, taking us back to the rose up top. That's it. Those are the collections of notes. And now with a color format. Again, if you see all of them, this looks overwhelming, not useful. It just looks like some gaudy like flag or something, right? That you're going to use right before you go terrorize someone or something like that. And it's like, no! But no, if you see it one at a time, then the color, then it's useful, right? This isn't the flag we're pulling out before we destroy someone. We're using the color to help people. Okay, any case. So next time we're going to add the octaves going up and back and so on.